Alright, these are my thoughts on Shonen Jump, the issue for the week of November 19th, 2018. Took a lot of notes this time. I'm probably going to need to condense as I go. So the first chapter this week was Dr. Stone, chapter 83, and Tsukasa makes it clear to everyone that he's pretty sure he's going to die in a few days. He can tell that his body is failing. And that is not enough time to figure out what caused petrification, so Senku says that they're going to have to freeze his body until they can properly petrify him and then revive him. And he makes it clear that they don't have anything near the technology capable of the science fiction cryogenically preserving someone and then thawing them and then they're all fine. He says, no, this will kill you. You're gonna die. And in the end, it seems that he decides that he would rather wait until after Tsukasa has passed, like right after he's passed, and then freeze him, because it would be a very painful experience, I'm sure, to be frozen alive. That would be horrifying. So he gets to work making a freezer, and of course, as with many of these inventions in the story, he works very fast. In a nutshell, the way it needs to work is they need to have tubes that they can pump air through in such a way that heat from the inside is sent outside as the air goes through the tubes. And Senku also says, as a side note, that if they make more of these, then they can help preserve food. Although he thinks that once they figure out the petrification thing, they could potentially even use that as an even better preservation method. Although, obviously, I'd imagine it's difficult to get the miracle fluid, so fridges are likely not to be outmoded anytime soon. So, while Senku is making the final preparations in a surprisingly sweet moment, he just kind of talks to Tsukasa as he fades out. They talk about who Tsukasa would have liked to bring with him if he'd been on that rocket of the survivors, or the various people Tsukasa had revived, and hey, what's this person's talent? You know, what do they do for your empire? And when Tsukasa actually finally passes, Senku is in the middle of discussing what kind of mushroom he thinks Mario eats. But when Tsukasa doesn't respond, then he knows that he's gone, and so he lowers him into the freezer. And Tsukasa's little sister Mirai, bless her soul, she says that she's going to look after the freezer until they figure everything out and they can petrify him and then bring him back to life. So, after what I think is implied is a short period of mourning, because he just watched someone die, and that would be pretty freaky. Senku exits the little cave where Tsukasa had been using as a deathbed, and he tells everyone it's time to get to work. And in order to figure out what the petrification came from, they need to be able to travel the world, because as I thought I remembered, the astronauts saw that it was coming from basically the other side of the planet from Japan. So they're going to need to be able to travel a far distance. So next several chapters will be focused on vehicular advancements, or at least I assume it'll take several chapters. Academia 206, and just as the end of the last chapter suggested, the fight did end in a tie, although it turns out there was actually a little more to it than what we saw with Todoroki and Ida being taken down, because elsewhere there was still a little more fight going on, and Pony actually, by number one, managing to send Ojiro to the jail cell because he had to briefly let go of her horns in order to get out of the softening ground that Juzo made, and then she lifted all of her other teammates into the air with her horns so that Class A's team couldn't bring any of them to the jail cells, so the match time limit ran out, with both teams having exactly one person in the jail cell. So, yeah, it was a tie, as expected. And Juzo and Ida and Todoroki briefly talk to each other once they wake up in the infirmary, because I think Todoroki and Juzo were actually the main ones who passed out, but Ida went in there anyway to get looked at. And they talk about what they think each other did well, and they promise they're going to square off again some other time. And the chapter ends with the fourth match beginning, and Bakugo has predictably taken charge of everyone else. Jiro, Sato, and Sero are his teammates, and they don't seem to like whatever plan he came up with. I'm guessing that it will largely include him going on and taking on the entire enemy team himself, and them being backup, I guess, because that's just the way he likes to do things. But actually, Monoma is particularly confident in how Class B can do this time around, because their team right now has their second recommended student, Setsuna Tokage, and he says that she's, quote, one naughty customer. So she must be good in combat, and judging from what the wiki's translation of her quirk is, that being lizard tail cut, I'm going to assume she can detach her limbs from herself, or something to that effect, just like a lizard can remove its tail. So that's my prediction. First chapter of the Ruby manga adaptation, and they did try to do something like this several years back, and it didn't run for very long. I never got that drawn into it, but at least for the time being, I will try and summarize it along with the other things. So this chapter starts with we see a group of thieves raiding a store to get something which is called dust. But as they're leaving, a girl in red shows up with a giant scythe and beats the crap out of them. That her name is Ruby, and she has an older sister named Yang, and the academy that Yang goes to, called Beacon Academy, has decided to accept Ruby to their ranks 2 years earlier than expected, because they're all impressed by how she took down that gang. Now there is a large flashback showing how she learned about that from her principal and the principal of Beacon Academy. I will note that the flashback was not denoted by black borders, which made it very confusing to tell. And it confused me for a little while. But as such, it also doesn't show exactly when the flashback ends. Kind of just have to figure it out. But when she gets to Beacon Academy, Yang tells her, "Okay, now you gotta go try and make a friend." And she just kind of sends her off, saying that she's dropping her off the cliff like lions do their cubs, which is something I heard. I think it was in Black Clover, which is kind of an interesting metaphor. Maybe it's more common in Japan. I'm not entirely sure, but I've only heard it in manga. Anyway, Ruby knocks over some containers, apparently, except we don't see it happen. It's all conveyed by speech bubbles of her yelling and then a crash, which once again made this a bit confusing to tell. But apparently, she knocked over some containers that had dust in them, and this student named Weiss is lecturing her about having done it because it could have exploded. Apparently, dust is very volatile, whatever this dust is. Actually, Weiss exposits that dust is a nifty power source, and also it can be used to enhance weapons and other things. Kind of an all-purpose magic substance, sort of, and it is explosive. And Ruby gets frustrated because, she didn't know, it was just an honest mistake, and and the two almost get into a fight before a fourth person named Blake. She appears seemingly out of nowhere and tells them to knock it off. And a little bit later, Ruby meets a guy named Jean. I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced, maybe? I don't know. And then, after he meets him, the manga suddenly jumps forward with all the students are being welcomed, and it's basically a very large info dump about what the school is for. In this case, it's training people to fight off the monsters of the series, and talking about dust and all that stuff. And then Ruby, Weiss, Blake, and Yang discover that they are bunkmates. And Yang says, "Oh, I didn't. You all got off to a bad start, but I think we should all be friends since we're bunkmates, and that's so we may as well get used to it." And judging by the fact that the first initial letters of each of their names uh, spell out the title of the series, one can assume that they will end up on good terms eventually. I'm going to be completely frank here. I don't like how this is looking. This isn't a knock on the concept of the series itself. I just think that whoever they got to adapt it into the manga, I already forgot what his name was, doesn't seem very good at it. It's hard to tell when something's a flashback. Things happen off screen and we're expected to understand it, and there's a whole lot of tell don't show, and um, I don't know. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to treat this like a jumpstart kind of, and I'll take notes on it until the third chapter, and if I am not sufficiently enjoying it by that time, then I will just drop it, which would make this the first thing I've dropped since I started doing this. I mean, this is the only the third week I've done this, so it makes sense. I haven't really had an opportunity to do that. This is the first new thing that's been introduced since I started, but um, yeah. Uh, Obviously, I hope that it gets better, but suppose we'll have to see. Next chapter was The Promised Neverland, chapter 112. And we find out that the gunshot at the end of the last chapter was Oliver's doing. He shot Andrew in his hand, in his shoulder. I forget if maybe they were on opposite limbs, but at any rate, the way he did it made it so that Andrew can no longer hold his gun, and he can no longer hold the little girl he was holding as hostage. And so she gets away, but Andrew's just insane, and he doesn't seem to really care that he has no real way to kill any of them. He just runs at them, intending to, I guess, kick them to death. And Ray actually prepares to fire him because he decides, okay, this guy is crazy and still potentially dangerous, and I know that Hugo and Lucas didn't want any of us to be burdened with killing another human, but I think that it's something that I am willing to do. You know, this is a situation where that's necessary. But before he can take a shot, he he looks up, and we pan back and realize that while Andrew has been ranting and raving and all that, a very large wild demon has been attracted, and so the thing just kind of chomps him. The danger is over. The kids take a moment to mourn Hugo and Lucas. They don't mention the guy who I thought was shot in the head last chapter, so maybe he isn't dead. But so they all cry, and once they're done, they say, "Okay, we can't let this distract us anymore. We've gotten our feelings out, and now we need to focus on surviving again." And Ray goes outside, scans the trees, and discovers that there's been a robotic owl following them and recording their movements. So he shoots it down with a bow, and reasons that it probably has been following them for a long time. There's actually a little panel suggesting that it's been following them as far back as when they were trying to find stuff. So, so that means that probably their current location is known, so they need to get out of here again. Luckily, Emma and Oliver have those coordinates that they got from the message, So they tell everyone that they're going to head there because that's their best bet. And a number of the kids are getting really disheartened because, it's seeming like there's nowhere safe. And Emma says, well, yes, that's right. There honestly is nowhere safe for us in this world, but that's why we're fighting. And so the chapter ends as we see someone saying to himself that he hopes the message reached them in time. And then a figure behind them says that he's sure it has. And then he says, it's time to begin, James. And it was a little while ago that this was mentioned, but James Rattray is the real name of William Minerva. So this means that Mr. Minerva is, in fact, alive. He is not as dead as he thought he was going to be when he left the message at Gold. Is that the militaristic message that they got on the phone was something that Mr. Minerva had recorded recently, and suggests that, even though he didn't die as he thought he was going to, something must have happened that has changed his outlook on the world. It will be interesting to see how things go from there. Next up, we never learn Chapter 88. So Naruyuki's and Fumino's quote-unquote date turns out to be stargazing because he knows that that should cheer her up. And he's actually learned a fair bit about them because he says that all of the enthusiasm she showed for it has kind of drew him in. And indeed, once she starts, going on about it, it is difficult to not get caught up in the sheer joy that she's emanating. But so here's where his plan kicked in, the plan that I thought he had. He tells her that he's pretty sure that her dad doesn't realize just how much this means to her, and she needs to go tell him. And so she just immediately gets up to leave because she doesn't want to deal with this. But he stops her, and he demands that no, this is something you need to do. And he says, in the end, no matter what happens, that he will support her with everything he's got. And this is a really nice callback to the 39th chapter of the series, when the two of them were sharing that room in the hotel, and she told him that once he realizes what he wants to do with his life and with his career, then she'll help him out. So that's really cool. This series isn't all about fan service and stuff. There are some genuinely heartwarming moments in it. So in the end, Fumino does go home. When her dad gets back from work, she's waiting for him there, just sitting on that. The reason she cares so much about the stars is because her mom passed on that joy to her, and how she loves the mystery and intrigue in them. How any star that we could be looking up and seeing may have been dead for years, for decades, for billions of years, maybe in some cases. And at the same time, there's stars out there that we can't even see because the light hasn't had enough time to reach the Earth. And how she feels like constellations have wonderful stories interwoven with them. And in the end, there's nothing that she could ever find more wonderful. And her dad kind of sees her mom overlaid with her and remembers, the passion that her mom showed. And he says that, okay, he didn't realize how passionate she was about it, but he still, despite all that, thinks that this isn't what she should do. And this actually, what he says now, makes a pretty large amount of sense. He says that she has gifts that she should use to better the world, and if she does something like this that doesn't use her gifts, then they'll be wasted. And so Fumino says, okay, well, I think it's time that we ask Mom to see how she feels about all this. And so she pulls out the laptop. The next chapter will presumably be the ending of this arc, where they're gonna find out what's in the folder and get this all settled. So I actually have a fair bit to say about this. I do agree with what Mr. Furuhashi said about how you should use your talents, because it's true she is, ridiculously good at writing and stuff, but I think that it's possible she might be able to use them with astronomy in a way, because with all the flowery language she was able to use to describe how she feels about the stars, I think it might be able to increase people's interest in it, and maybe you could transform uh, what would otherwise be relatively boring facts about fireballs that we could never possibly get to in centuries or millennia or something like that, and she might be able to make it more interesting to people. Um, that's my take on it. That's what I hope happens, because it would be a way for her to follow her dreams and also still use her talents. But we're going to have to see how this goes next time. So the next chapter was Hunter x Hunter, chapter 389. And first, Prince Benjamin's guards are discussing the suicide this soldier Shikaku had recently. And they're pretty sure that must have had something to do with Nen, because there was a rumbling that they could feel that stopped as soon as he shot himself. So the theory they make is that he killed himself to, in some way, prevent Prince Benjamin from being attacked. But the question remains, what was it that he was trying to prevent? And the guy with the goatee, I don't remember who he is, the bald guy with the goatee who works with Prince Benjamin, says that he's pretty darn sure that this wasn't anything to do with a Nen beast, because if Nen beasts could directly attack other princes, then by now the succession battle would probably be over, because they would have just gone straight in and attacked each other. So he thinks that Shikaku believed that he was going to be manipulated by someone else's Nen, and the rumbling was him using his own Nen to manipulate himself, which is an interesting concept, because you can't be manipulated by multiple Nen users at once. I'm not sure if that's been addressed before, but I didn't know that. So the question remains, though, why he chose to kill himself in front, and why he did it in front of room 1007. So the next day, we cut away from this for a bit. The next day, Prince Benjamin senses the fourth rumbling that Karapika sensed at the end of the last chapter. And similarly, he recognizes that the intervals are getting shorter. So he and the goatee guy contact the guard who is with Ninth Prince Halkenberg, because they're pretty sure that's where it's coming from. And sure enough, Halkenberg has just done that his Nen thing with the bow, and they hear the guard Vict say, when the bow fires, he's invincible, and then the feed cuts out. So, um, so Benjamin and Goatee Guy talk about how the guard Vict had a large amount of defensive prowess. So if he was overpowered, then whatever Hulkenberg is doing must take a ton of power. In fact, they predict that every time he uses it, they bet he's sacrificing one of his allies, which is absolutely accurate. Um, I'm kind of surprised that they were able to get it on their first try, but yeah, that's exactly what happens. Once he sacrifices one of his allies, he launches an attack which cannot be avoided or blocked, and will kill whoever it is aimed at. And additionally, will prevent anyone from attacking him while he is firing it. But Benjamin actually confirms that, using his Nen ability, that Vict is still alive. So whoever he killed with the attack wasn't Vict. But nevertheless, Goatee Guy says, well, we know that Hulkenberg launched an attack, so he calls in to have him arrested. That's something I forgot that they could do, was arrest people, princes, for attacking. I mean, it makes sense, but it's just something that I don't think has been addressed for a while. And so the plan is that while he's being held, he'll be separated from all of his men. Is on trial, they say, or the goatee guy says that will be their one chance to take him out because he can't use his power without any of his men. Elsewhere in the ship, one of the guards is treated to a surprise early birthday party by his prince, and I'm pretty sure that something is going to go wrong with this. There's something Nen involved here because, I mean, it just seems like a weird thing to just mention. By the way, this one soldier had a birthday party. So there's also some investigating into the suicide, and various guards think about, oh, I bet it was a plot by this prince. Oh no, I think it was this prince. Yada yada yada. Lots of text walls. And what's interesting, though, it turns out that one guard hypothesized that the suicide may have been a way to attack the occupants of Room 1007, and it seems like this isn't very far-fetched, because the second prince, Camilla, has 9 guards who are specifically prepared to do something like that. That's a plan that they have. Each of these guards is intends to go and commit suicide near a specific prince, which each one has designated themselves. They have, I think it said, they have a piece of clothing related to that prince and an image of them. And the closer they are to the prince, and the longer they wait, the stronger effect this suicide will have in launching a curse on them. So curse will get stronger depending on where the qualifications are met. And at its very strongest, which I think they said would be, they would have to be actually touching the prince, then the curse will kill them in a few hours. But some of the princes are already dead, so the guards who were assigned to them have now shifted their goals to they're still willing to die, but in this case they intend to give their lives to get rid of whatever curse they theorize Shikaku left with his suicide. Although before they off themselves, there's an exorcist who is checking first to see if a curse can be detected. And there's actually talk about using one of them to send a trial curse to see if any of the other princes have exorcists, which they'd be able to tell if the curse vanishes. I'm not sure how they keep track of them. But there's this lady called the Major Domo who says that won't work because the Nen beasts are very powerful, and she is certain that any curse other than the absolute strongest, like a curse launched at point blank range, could be by the Nen beasts. So the person who appears to be the leader of Kamila's guards volunteers to go to the Nen training sessions and thus begin building up a curse by being close to the 14th prince. Speaking of the training sessions, the chapter ends with one of the soldiers returning from the training and telling his prince, "Oh, it's amazing. My perception of the world has changed. I can even see your spirit beast." This particular beast being that one that spits out coins. And so the prince says, "Oh, congratulations! Here, I'll give you one." And he says, "Oh, it's an honor." But then another guard who already has a coin noted that the number on his own coin went up when this occurred. So we're slowly learning, I guess, little tidbits about what these coins are and how this Prince and Nen beast works. Next up was the 6th chapter of the. So Himekawa immediately tries to BS his way out of suspicion. He says, "Oh, I chased Ryota here, and that's why I'm here." But the Sakamaki siblings, they aren't having that. And Ryota says that we aren't leaving until the truth has been revealed. So they start making their case. Meanwhile, that weird, mysterious large fellow who knows about the Pumpkin Club is hearing all this through this little ring on his finger. So Himekawa says, "Listen, I didn't know the victim, but I bet my assistant, Mr. Baba, tried to get close to her, and then she rejected his advances, and so he killed her, and that's why he did it. But I never knew her, so obviously I can't do it." And so the siblings immediately show the photo they found, showing that no, in fact, he knew her very closely because they took a photo together. And they also followed up by pointing out that it's very curious that when they said, "Come to where we can see the fireworks," he came to this specific place, which is where the murder happened, because the fireworks could be seen from a number of different places. Speaking of, they also show footage of his live stream during which the fireworks could be heard, which proves that he wasn't at his studio as he claimed. And so the detective who's been processing all of this admits, okay, yeah, this information all affects the case, so we're gonna have to question Mr. Himekawa some more. And Ryota is basically all the charges against him are dropped. It's not even really mentioned. Uh, they just switch gears to Himekawa. They're like, yeah, actually, he got a pretty, I got a pretty strong case built against him. But while he's being led away, the large figure flicks a switch on the ring that's been broadcasting the conversation, and Himekawa just starts convulsing as they call an ambulance. So this means that something must have been planted on him. I don't know what. But to confuddle things further, at the end of the chapter, Ryota sees something in Mr. Raba's manga panels, and he realizes that he has misconstrued some of the information, and the mystery actually goes deeper. In fact, he now believes that on the night of the murder, Himekawa himself died. So, I guess that would mean that, I'm assuming that the person we've been treating as Himekawa is actually a robot. The big dude made to replace him or something. Um, it would explain how he has been hearing the things that's going on around him, and how he was able to flick a switch and hurt him if he's like a robot, and that's just a power off switch or something. I don't know. But at the same time, this would have to be a very complex robot because he's shown expressions of fear and he sweats, and they brought him to the hospital and did not uh, notice after checking up on him that, oh wait, no, this dude's a robot. So I don't know, but I guess the siblings are going to need to investigate the Pumpkin Club thing some more. World Trigger Chapter 160. The fighting continue. Kageura Squad and Suzunari Squad are still fighting upstairs, and aside from the firefight that was going on last chapter, now their main attackers are fighting with swords, and Suzunari Squad's gunner reveals that he's got a second rifle, and by hiding behind one of his teammates' shields, he can discard his own in favor of having dual wielding guns. This is a pretty simple strategy, but the announcers seem to treat it as something novel. So I don't know. I guess most people just don't think about that. Um, while this is going on, Osamu is running away from from the people he ran into, and his tactical retreat is going very well because he's using thruster to speed himself up, and shows enough control that when a gunner from one of the other teams is about to shoot his pursuer while he's caught off guard, Osamu actually knocks his pursuer out of the way. His team can get the points for the kill later. He's fast enough to do that without the guy following him being able to attack him either. So suddenly all the lights in the building go out because one of the agents found the switch. It's actually quite a realistic building setup. Then they even have light switches. Um, and so everyone is everyone pauses for a moment, and Osamu ends up losing his arm because the light from his trigger is enough for one of the enemies to see him and shoot it off. So he's in a bit of a tight spot. Not sure how he's going to get out of this one. Next up is Black Clover 182, in which two of the elves have just had their artificial bodies finished growing. And so they were able to reincarnate into them. And since one of them is the lady who used to have Salamander, I'm assuming the other one was her boyfriend, who I think was Mars, was what he was called. So that would imply that when those two regained control, and what was quite a while ago now, of their bodies, the elves were just flat out kicked out of their bodies, and so now they needed new ones. And meanwhile, the various leaders of the group, calling themselves the Apostles of Saphira, meet up, including Licht, because he's woken up now. And so they all talk, but they note that there is still one of their leaders who is missing, and that is whichever elf possessed Yuno. So they figure, oh, well, we'll find him later. For now, let's begin the ritual. And so this big, shadowy castle thing rises up from the ruins of Clover Castle. And apparently they put it there when they made a truce with the humans years ago. I don't know what use it would have been for. I don't know what the humans needed a giant shadow castle for. In fact, the elves explain that this is a portal to the underworld, which they're going to use to banish the human souls directly from their bodies. So I really don't know what the humans would have wanted it for. Perhaps the elves gave it to them as a precaution, so that if they were betrayed, then they will be able to use it for this. I'm not sure. But so the Magic Knights in the area try to attack them to stop the ritual, but a bunch of other elves show up, and they can't get to the apostles. But the Black Bullzord, as I like to call, as I think is the suitable thing to call it, the castle morphed into a bull. It arrives with all of the other Black Bulls to assist, so the odds of getting up to the apostles is now greatly improved. But none of the fighting started yet. And then the last chapter in this issue was Food Wars, number 288. And so the judge, as Tsukasa, take the money, earn, and go. He he says, "Oh, I didn't bring anything to put it in." But she thinks to herself about why Tsukasa was able to so perfectly convenience store ingredients are different from gourmet ingredients in that their flavors are generally evened out. Even something that we get at a convenience store and we say, "Oh, this is spicy," is still barely more spicy than its other flavors. Typically, things are very average. And gourmet food is always focused in one or two specific flavor profiles. So you need to transform the convenience store food so that so that the parts of the flavor profile you don't want are removed, and the ones you do want are enhanced, such that it resembles gourmet food. That's what she is looking for. And so several chefs managed to pass. Meanwhile, Soma is just grabbing tons of different things from the shelves. Just a lot of things. And people are saying, "This is what? He's going to make a mess. He's just grabbing all tons of stuff." But when he finishes, he reveals he made a box set, that a food box set. He says that the Yukihira restaurant puts out every New Year's. It's like a feast, but with bite-sized portions, kind of. And he does say that he put his own spin on the components, so he just really borrowed the idea from his dad. So that satisfies my worry that he was going to coast by using his dad's techniques. But what's really impressive, and what impresses the people watching, is that he managed to make so many different things in such a short time. And so the judge, she takes a bite, and she says, it's nothing special, but she can't help but eat one of the other things, and then another and another, until she's just gobbling a ton of it. I imagine she must have a ton of room in her stomach. Yeah, these judges must train to have a ton of room. Um, but she's amazed. She says, "You've made a free form full course meal. No matter what part you start on, um, you can move to any other part, and it will go well as the next thing to eat." I don't know how you managed to do that with all these different things, but he managed to do that. And so, what's neat, I like this. He says that he was only able to do something this complex in under an hour because he was using convenience store ingredients, because they're all pre-cooked or pre-made in some way. So he didn't have to do much prep work, so he could get straight to putting things together. And the judge admits that despite the fact he didn't transform any of the ingredients in the way she wanted, he managed to make gourmet food anyway, just by adding this many things to get together that go well together. And so that's out of the way, and he gets that signature devious Soma look. You know, the one where like his eyes white out. He gets that really big grin, and he says, "Okay, now give me what I earned." And so she has one of the clothes exploding reactions. Although the funny thing is, it's actually more accurate here than otherwise, because as she puts it, with food that tasty, she might have to sell the shirt off her back. Which it's corny, but it's funny. And we don't get to see exactly how much he earned, but whatever the amount, he has definitely passed. Um, so that's this week's issue. A lot of stuff to talk about this week. Um, I do wonder how the Ruby manga is going to go. But we're going to have to wait and see on that. I am thinking that eventually I might start talking about some of the series in the free section, but I knew that those will probably be in their own much smaller videos. So, at any rate, if you did, then feel free to leave a like and maybe subscribe, and then come back next time and hear me ramble some more.